Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter podcast. I am your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I am on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship is conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter podcast. I am your host, Johnny Mack. Tonight, I am joined by one of my best buddies and one of the dudes who I was able to experience my first hunting success with, and that is when I went out to North Dakota about 5 years ago and went coyote hunting with him. And on that, I was able to call in my first coyote, have my first success, and really have a concept of what it's like to go after an animal, have success on taking it, and really celebrate its life. It was quite an experience, and tonight we're going to be diving into the journey of an elk hunter and how you cannot outgive good. We got my good buddy Jeff Winslow from North Dakota joining us on the podcast. He is a former roommate of mine back in our younger years, in our 20s. We also went to college together, and just all around great dude. And so tonight he's going to share a story about his journey of being a hunter, specifically on elk. He was with me when I was able to take my very first elk and my first antlered animal, which was a beautiful bull here in the state of Washington. And he had an opportunity to shoot it before I did. We'll get into that and a lot more. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us tonight, man.
Hey, you bet. That's a heck of an introduction.
Well, you're a heck of a friend, I tell you.
Hey, I appreciate it.
If more people need to have friends like you, is what I'm saying.
Oh, hey, that's pretty humbling. Thank you. I appreciate that. It just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, well, you deserve it. All right, so Jeff, tell everyone who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Winslow. I'm originally from the state of Washington. I moved out to North Dakota with my wife 10 years ago, and I teach physical education at the high school. I coach football. I coach track. I stay pretty busy. I also have 3 wonderful children that keep me on my toes. Yeah, I mean, a family man living the dream.
Yep. Yeah, you are an outdoorsman through and through. It seems like you are in the mecca of outdoor world. You have in the winter your ice fishing, you got the great flyway of all your waterfowl, and a lot of big game that you get to do when you're out there as well. Take us through a little bit about what your general season and your year looks like with the progression of all the different animals that you hunt out there.
Oh man, that's awesome. I like to start off with early Canada goose, if at all possible. And from there, we kind of work into archery deer season right there, end of August, 1st of September. From there, depending on the year, this year was one of those crazy years where I drew a once-in-a-lifetime tag, and I know we'll visit about that later, so that consumed a lot of my time. But on a typical year, you can find me shooting a lot of waterfowl, a lot of upland, shooting lots of pheasants in the October, November. And then that typically transitions into ice fishing in December. And then ice fishing usually wraps up sometime around March. And spring turkey is just around the corner. Matter of fact, I just put my application in today. So then from spring turkey in April, it seems like we go right into boating season and walleye fishing. And I also shoot some NRL long range competitions with my rifle and shoot some prairie dogs in the summer.
Come on, I was waiting for you to say that. I'm like, come on now.
Just for casual leisure, you know, when the buddies get together and we need something to do, a little bit of practice there. But it's pretty much year round, nonstop. And you're right. I live in a great place to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, you sure do. It's always been fun coming from the state of Washington and going out to North Dakota and just see what is around. It seems like you're only an hour or two drive to a lot of different animals or a lot of different access to different styles of hunting. And take us through your journey of just being a hunter. So you were born and raised here in the state of Washington, and at what age did you start hunting?
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, it kind of almost curtails into, some of the things that you talk about, uh, with adult hunters and hunter recruitment. But by most small town standards, I got a pretty late start on things. A lot of my friends back home, you know, they joke they grew up with a rifle in one hand and a chainsaw in the other. That wasn't really my case. Playing sports, I played a pile of sports all through high school, and I didn't take my hunter's ed until the end of my senior year of high school. So I didn't really experience hunting until like my freshman year of college.
Yeah.
So it wasn't quite the stereotypical, you know, dad takes his 8-year-old son out and starts showing him the ropes. I didn't necessarily have that.
Yeah, which is too much of a shame. I feel like you and we met when we were in college, and as far as the state of Washington is concerned, we grew up in probably one of the best places to be a hunter, or went to college in one of the best places to be a hunter, and that is Central Washington University. We got the largest elk herd in the state. You're really close to the backside of the Alpine Lakes Wilderness for all the wonderful mule deer hunting. You have the Yakima Canyon has bighorn sheep and all sorts of stuff. Great fishing, all of that. And yet here we are. I missed my opportunity to be in this wonderful spot and start hunting. You kind of got into it your freshman year. We met each other junior, senior year, and yet we're talking about hunting when we were in our 30s, and that's when you and I really got to start hunting for the first time. What was it like in college? What was your experience, and go from there?
Yeah, the college experience was contrastly different from the experiences that I have now. We were broke, and sometimes we'd share guns and kind of muster up a few bucks here and there just for the bare necessities. But it was a lot of road hunting. Let's hop in the truck and let's drive. And if we see something that we can legally shoot, then let's go for it.
Yep.
Size wasn't really an issue. We weren't looking for the biggest buck. We weren't necessarily out there hoofing it miles on end. It was pretty casual and pretty social.
Yeah, it was more for that college experience of just getting to hang out with the buddies and yet do something that you both love at the same time.
Yep, for sure. Well, I mean, throughout this time that we spent together, I think your listeners are going to pick up on the fact that, we've spent a lot of time together. And we talk a lot about team sports, and you and I have backgrounds in team sports. And the things that we love about those team sports are just being together with other people with that common goal. And, once team sports was out of my life, you're kind of looking for things to fill that void, and I just felt like hunting was a natural fit. I got a chance to spend time with my good friends. We all had a common goal, and, we kind of worked towards that goal. And it really kind of helped fill that void in my life at that time.
That's pretty awesome. So fast forward a little bit. We graduate college. You and we are living together. You're hunting. We're both coaching. I am like in la la land. I'm still a fan and a proponent of the Second Amendment, but I have no idea, no concept about hunting, and which is sad. Can't believe I missed that, but I live with no regrets.
That's right.
That's why I got the tattoo that says "No regrets" on my arm.
Hey,
You
not
know,
even one letter.
I'm just kidding. Right. So, yeah. So, no regrets. You end up getting a teaching job in the state of North Dakota. We go our separate ways. We end up getting married, all this stuff. And here you are. You've gone on this journey of starting off hunting with it being more of like a social thing and truck hunting, and it was something that you kind of just did with your buddies, to all of a sudden you found yourself in this completely different environment surrounded by multiple types of deer, with both mule deer and whitetail and all these different things. What was it like, and how was it that you got so immersed in the hunting culture in North Dakota? Was it a mentor? Who was it that took your hand? Did you have anybody? Go from
Oh,
there.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Man, first off, I mean, I got to tell you, the people of North Dakota, when people talk about Midwest nice, I mean, they really are. It's the people out here are tremendous. And my first year teaching out here, our seventh grade science teacher, uh, he's retired now. I want to say at the time he was in his late 50s. And I told him that I like to hunt. And he said, well, I've got a few spots. If you'd like to come with me sometime, I'd love it if you came. And, from there on, our relationship just grew. Almost kind of like a father figure, showing me the ropes. And I was still relatively green as far as uh, just knowing things about hunting, right? Uh, so
How
he
old were you
really,
when you moved out to North Dakota?
boy, that would have been 10 years ago. So carry the one, I would have been about 26.
Okay, so at this point, you've been hunting about 7 years.
Yeah, right in there. But
Okay, but
the
with
but the
no real mentorship or over an abundance of experience.
right, like I told you early, in our younger years, it was let's get in the truck and drive. And so that's what we did, because that's all we knew. If a warehouse or gate was open, and at the time, if the gates were open, let's go. You know, um, and that really kind of shaped my early years of hunting. Uh, but as I got out here and got with our science teacher, he really kind of started showing me the ins and outs and all just the idiosyncrasies that go along with, what it takes to hunt. And when I moved out here, I don't know if you remember this when we were living together, but you remember that bow that I worked for from Nate's dad?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So our other roommate, just to kind of bring your listeners in, our other roommate, his dad had a company, had some odd jobs, and instead of taking money, I got my first bow, which was a Hoyt Tricon. And as it all worked out, as things tend to do, when I moved out here, I couldn't get a rifle tag because I was a non-resident at the time, but I could get an over-the-counter archery tag. And so my first year of hunting was with Dwayne, the science teacher, with him, and I was bow hunting. And that was my first real crack at bow hunting. And I was so green. There was so much I didn't know. And, being younger and in relatively good shape, all I wanted to do was just go, go, go. Hey, there's an animal. Let's go get it. And I quickly found out, with a bow in your hand, you can't just walk up on an animal. They're not just sitting there waiting to die.
No, definitely not.
So there was a lot to learn, and the learning curve was steep. But similar to you, I wouldn't say to the extreme that you are. I'm definitely not running an ultra marathon anytime soon. But I enjoy a good challenge. And that first day we went out, I saw a couple deer, and that got me pretty excited, but I was skunked. I didn't even get close. And kind of since that moment, I just thought, okay, game on. I'm going to learn everything I can learn about these animals. And, at some point, I'm going to put an arrow in one of these things.
Yeah. And how did it go?
Well, let's see. I'm staring at the buck that I shot at the end of that year. as we're recording right now, I'm looking at that. And over the last 10 years, I think I've failed 7 archery deer tags between whitetail and mule deer, and 3 rifle tags, including one that was a pretty nice unit. In North Dakota, it's the 4B unit, and that's where we have pretty tremendous mule deer. And I was fortunate enough to draw that tag and be able to put the smack down on one there. That was incredible.
That's pretty cool. So explain to the listeners, in the state of North Dakota, even if you're a resident, it's not guaranteed that you get a rifle tag. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. So
you're guaranteed to get an archery tag. That's over the counter. But if you want to get a rifle tag, you got to apply for it and build up points and all that?
Yes. Yeah. So archery tag, you can, when you buy your combination license for the year, you can buy your archery tag right with it. But the rifle tags is all draw only, and it's all done on a point system. And a lot, like most states, you know, we've got some really, really good units, and then we've got some not so good units, you know, and some of these better units we have just produce tremendous deer, and tremendous elk.
Man, that is so cool. So were you doing mostly spot and stock hunting, or were you hunting out of a blind? Like where did you cut your teeth?
I cut my teeth spot and stock for sure. I've sat in ground blinds. I've taken deer out of ground blinds, and that's a little more laid back experience, depending on the time of the year. You know, a few years ago when I was sitting in the blind when it was like 15 below and I had my little heater going, that was rather uncomfortable. But you know, I've taken a few deer out of the ground blind, but the majority of my deer would have been spot and stock mule deer.
Man, that's cool. So it gives you a lot of experience. You've spot stocked mule deer, which is not easy, and you're working on your craft. When did you dive into elk hunting? Where has it taken you? And then we'll eventually lead into the story of you and I getting to archery elk hunt together, and we're going to talk about your once in a lifetime tag that you were able to draw this last year.
Sure. So my first experience elk hunting was that second year of college when we were in Ellensburg there. I went with my roommate in September, and he went calling elk. And growing up, I've seen elk, and I've been on logging roads where elk were shot, even though I wasn't hunting. And I've seen elk growing up in Lewis County, where I'm from. Lots of people elk hunt, and especially if you go west into Pacific County and get out into the Willapa Hills and PL and that area. I mean, there's elk out there, and I've worked with guys that were diehard elk hunters out there, and I've been around it. But my first real taste of it was that it was my second year of college. It would have been sophomore year when I was over in Ellensburg, and my buddy, we went driving up the canyon there, and he's like, let's get out and call elk. And he called in a bull that was probably 30 yards, and he was bugling, and the earth just shook. And it was one of those moments that you just never forget. And I knew right there that that's something I wanted to do, you know? And so I bought elk licenses the last few years there in Ellensburg, but just never filled one. It just, for whatever reason, never worked. You know, you'd go out, you wouldn't see anything, or you would go out and you'd see something and you wouldn't be able to shoot it. It'd be too far, not big enough, or, you know, just those kinds of obstacles. And yeah, so I mean, I had some experience with it, and I grew up around it, but it wasn't until I moved out here, my first year out here, I was talking to another friend of mine, and I told him that I really wanted to archery elk hunt. And he told me the best bet to do that over the counter, or over the counter / a really good draw odds was Eastern Montana. And I told him I was going to apply, and I did, and I got that tag and went out there and just cut my teeth that first year. So, sorry about that. That right there was an incredible experience. We hiked in, we backpacked in about, I want to say it was a little over 3 miles, set up camp, and we were into elk immediately that next morning. And we got on a really nice bull. And I drew back and had the distances wrong. I shot a little bit high, and we thought this thing was, Pump City, and we thought we smoked this thing, and we were celebrating, and we ended up looking for that bull for the next 3 days and couldn't find it. So we went back and looked at some of the footage, and it was high, and there's just up in that no man's land, and it was a disgusting feeling. But it's that feeling of not so much like I failed and I want to give up. It was, okay, I learned a lot. I didn't get the animal. I ate the tag. I threw the tag away after I hit it, and it just motivated me. And so from there, I ended up, I hunted elk in Colorado for 3 years down there. And then we got to hunt together just recently back in Washington.
Yeah, when you were hunting out of state, what was it that you were looking for? How were you finding your locations? Were you doing a lot of e-scouting, or were you actually driving to the locations and doing some summer hiking and all that?
Sure. When I was hunting in Montana in the breaks there, that's about 6-7 hours from where I live. So I would drive there overnight, get up in the morning, do some hiking, get a lay of the land, try and figure what's what. But I didn't see any elk when I was doing that. And then I had a friend of a friend, plug me in to another guy in Havre, in Montana, which is about another 5 hours from where I live. So I drove over and met him like on a Saturday morning. And this guy is an elk killing machine. Coincidentally, his nickname is Killer. And
usually those don't line up, but you always love it when they do.
Yeah, that's right. So he knew the area that I was hunting inside and out, and we got on the Onyx, and he started pointing out different areas. And he's like, there's no water here on the map, but I know there's water here, and they feed here, and people are going to push them this way. And he really kind of laid the groundwork for my opportunity to shoot that elk. And so once he kind of gave me that plan, I went back, I looked at it some more, I started seeing elk, and I felt pretty good. And my buddy here in Williston that went with me, who didn't have a tag, he just went with me to help. We got in on elk that next morning, and like I said, we had a great opportunity. He was standing 63 yards away, and we still joke about this, but at the time it was definitely no laughing matter. But he was standing 63 yards, and I ranged a tree that was just a little bit behind him, and I shot him for 75. And left and right was great, but my elevation just too high up there in no man's land. And yeah, that was a pretty tough learning experience.
Yeah, well, you can't learn unless you have those learning experiences. It's through the failures that we make our greatest gains in life, and really can use that as motivation and help us moving forward.
Right. So I mean, with that hunt there was boots on the ground. there was e-scouting involved, and there was a lot of trips back and forth between where I was hunting and then, where I live. My Colorado trips, I have a cousin down there that we call him the Colonel for the obvious reasons. He's a colonel in the
He's
Army.
a colonel.
Yep. And he had a lot of the areas that he had hunted growing up, that were kind of traditional areas that him and I went and explored. So I'll tell you what, sitting up at 11,000 feet I'm not a small guy. Maybe some of your listeners will see my picture and they'll shake their head and wonder how I shot an elk, or let alone kept up with you on our elk hunt that we had together back in the mountains of Washington. But I'll tell you what, hanging out at 11,000, 12,000 feet in Colorado, that was no joke. That was quite the experience.
Tested your grit a little bit?
Definitely tested my grit.
I love it. All right, so fast forward, you shot an elk eastern Montana in the breaks, couldn't recover it.
Right.
You take a shot on an elk in Colorado, you don't hit it.
Right.
You're building up a lot of, I would imagine, frustration. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but like, what are you feeling after this point?
Well, it's it's hard to explain, but those early hunts, it was definitely frustration, and you'd kind of get into a little bit of self-loathing, but as soon as that kind of started to creep in, I'd have those positive self-talks with myself, the same ones that football coaches give their football players. So I quickly snapped out of that. But it was a determination more than anything else. It just kind of kept fueling my fire. Right up until my final experience that I thought just broke me. And I thought that was going to be it. And that I thought elk hunting was going to be no longer a part of my life. But those early experiences, those 4 to 5 experiences I've had, it was more of a motivation than anything else.
Yeah, you're like, oh, okay, I can do this.
Yep. Oh, for sure. One time it's the wind is wrong, and you learn from that. One time you go charging in there with your eyes on this bull, only to look over your shoulder and see the cow sitting there staring at you. You learn from that. You learn something each time you go out, and I felt like I was learning, and I felt like it was only a matter of time. So my motivation stayed high, but everyone talks about the straw that breaks the camel's back. Well, you and I were together on that one, and I definitely thought that was going to be it for me.
Yeah, and we're going to dive into that here in just a second. It's quite the story. But one of the things I want to share is like this idea that a lot of people, and we joke about this, Jeff, you and I have always gone back and forth with the whole idea of like physical dominating someone or mentally dominating somebody.
Yep.
To be a successful elk hunter, it's like you need to be in physical shape in order to be able to be where they are.
Yep, for sure.
You also have to be mentally sharp to be able to get them in the moment in which that you're going to be able to trick them and have success.
To get them close. Yeah. It's one thing to be in their presence as far as, sharing the same environment as them, but it's quite another to work to 60 yards on one, and I know there's probably other listeners that are like, I get these things, within 15, 20 yards of me all the time, every September. Well, I'm sure you're a really good caller. I am not. I'm not. I'm novice at best. You can find me during right before elk season and during elk season, listening to podcasts and trying to learn everything I can about calling elk and what to sound like, what they're saying, why they're saying it, and all that good stuff. So I definitely do not fancy myself an elk caller. So it's hard for me to, bring them in.
Yeah.
So I rely on stealth as much as a 6'1", 320-pound guy can rely on stealth.
Hey, man, you are very light on your feet.
That's right. I'm agile.
I love it. Okay, so let's bring the listeners up to speed. You have hunted Eastern Montana, you've hunted Colorado. All of a sudden, your best buddy J Mac from the state of Washington is like, dude, I want to hunt. Do you want to come out and hunt elk with me? I get into bow hunting. And so we decide to go on an archery elk hunt together. You fly out from North Dakota to hunt your home state, even though you still had to buy an out of state tag. And we plan this epic adventure of an archery elk hunt. And what happens?
Well, before we get going too far, and I know when I get off track, you'll get me right back on track, so I won't stay on this tangent too long. But I hope that your listeners have had a chance to look into your story, because 10 years ago, you and I hunting wouldn't have been a thing. So
No.
I hope your listeners get a chance to take a look at your story and where you came from and where you are today. And I told you a while ago, I remember saying when we started talking about hunting, I said something to the effect that, if you show me that, hunting is serious to you and something that you really want to do, I can't wait to hunt with you. And all of a sudden it was like a fire inside of you that just lit, and the passion that you have for hunting and conservation and just people in general, it was motivating. So when I saw that, I was extremely excited at the opportunity to hunt with you. So I just kind of want to throw that in there.
I appreciate that,
Jay.
Jay.
I don't want that to get lost in the mix, because there was a time when we were living together and going to school and doing those things that, you and I sharing a hunt wasn't exactly at the forefront of both of our brains, I think.
Right. There are some other things that we were chasing instead.
Yeah. Yep. So anyways, I didn't want to go too far off path, but I definitely wanted to mention that.
So for the listeners, I decided when I became a hunter, I wanted to give it my all. I had this idea of how important hunting has been to me. It's transformed my life. That's why the tagline for this podcast is transforming lives through primal adventure. And I had just became this completely different person, not only like consumed, but when I hunted and when I went out into the woods and I challenged myself physically, mentally, emotionally, I became a better, sharper person, not only at work, not only at home, but in different avenues of my life. And it spilled over all because I found this purpose, passion, and drive for becoming a hunter. And so here I am with Jeff. I'm like, dude, Jeff, I want to hunt with you, in the different seasons, and knowing that I was going to be rifle deer hunting, but archery elk. Jeff, do you want to come to Washington, archery elk hunt with me? He was like, let's make it happen. And the story goes, without ruining it, on this hunt, I shoot the bull of a lifetime, a beautiful 6x6 Washington mature herd bull. Called it in, got to hear the rumble of a bull elk for the very first time in the woods. Like Jeff was talking about earlier, I felt the earthquake underneath me, and just the whole experience is like perfect. You could not ask for a better experience in aspect of that specific moment and the hunt. But there was a lot more of the story to go along with it, and that's why we're talking about Jeff's journey of being an elk hunter. Is he went from state to state to state hunting these just majestic animals, and was having a lot of difficulty finding success with actually taking one home with them and getting to share it with his family and friends. So here he is, the Journey of an Elk Hunter. He comes to the state of Washington. He's with his good buddy. We feel like the odds are in our favor. We're ready to go. We got good time off work. And Jeff and I get to the location and we decide to hunt and flip a coin based off of who's going to be the first shooter. Jeff.
Yeah.
You drew the first day. You called what, heads or tails? What was it?
Oh, tails never fails, and it didn't. Or did it?
So Jeff being from out of state, I was like, I'm going to defer to you to call the coin toss, and he wins the coin toss. So he's like, all right, day one, I'm first shooter. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm there to support you.
Yeah.
And we get on all sorts of elk sign. But what else did we get on? We were just absolutely bombarded by who?
Oh, we had a fair amount of people with us too. So what was going on? Wasn't the Pacific Crest Trail or something was diverted because of a fire?
Yeah, there's a bunch of fires that year in the state of Washington, and they were pushing a lot of hikers down off the PCT into the different trail systems in which we were hunting.
Yep. Yeah. So I had the opportunity to be day one shooter, and we were excited, and we got out, and we started beating bush, and we were getting up and down the mountain, and we were covering a lot of ground, and we saw a lot of elk sign, and we were starting to feel really confident about where we were and what we were doing. And we had solicited a bit of help. I know I shot a few DMs out to some different people in the elk industry. And I know Jason Phelps was courteous enough to get back to me and kind of help us as far as pointing us in some direction. And so we were feeling really good about where we were at. And I thought that we were going to get into some action right away, day one. But, we covered a lot of miles, and in the mountains, you're up the mountain, you're down the mountain, you're in the saddle, and then you're on the other side, and then it's dark, and then you got to go back, so we worked our tails off day one, didn't get to see any elk, which was okay, because we had, what was this? I think it was a 7-day hunt we were on. We were hunting for the 7 days, and we knew it'd just be a matter of time. So we got through that day one and got back to camp, and got to bed because we were pretty excited about day two. And day two showed up, and it was your turn to shoot.
Yeah, and I woke up just feeling it. I felt like it was my time. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I'm a big believer in manifestation and speaking truth over life. So earlier, rewind. So we're in September, rewind back to December, and I am experiencing Born and Raised Land of the Free series for the very first time, and I'm watching it while I'm running on a treadmill, and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna archery hunt. I'm gonna buy a bow. I'm gonna hunt elk with a bow, and you know what? I'm gonna shoot a bull. I'm gonna not just a small bull. I'm gonna shoot a giant 6x6 symmetrical bull elk with my bow this year. And I would just keep saying it out loud, and just like it became like a mantra for me when I was on the treadmill. And people can believe what they want. I believe in the power of positive thinking. I also believe that if you say it and you truly believe it, that the universe is going to work in your favor. Whether you believe in all that weird stuff, I also believe in that you can't outgive good, and that is definitely one of the themes of this episode tonight, is that you can't outgive good. So here I am starting up this idea of Washington backcountry, where mentorship is conservation. We're talking about hunter recruitment, hunter mentorship, giving back to people who have no mentors or adult onset hunters that have no real direction on where to start. We're trying to be a resource for them. And here I am. I'm like, dude, I'm going to archery elk hunt for the very first time. I'm going to shoot a 6x6 symmetrical bull. I got this. It's like destiny. It's like, it's like it's meant to happen. And
Yeah.
here we
And
are, fast forward to September,
yeah,
and I'm in the Elk Woods
uh,
with my good buddy Jeff.
yeah, you are definitely the power of positive thinking personified. And to give your listeners just an idea, so some of the people that I work with and coach with, uh, one of them, he calls me a full-time skeptic. And that's probably not the best compliment a guy ever wants. I like to tell people that live in reality in the here and the now. Um, so in some ways, uh, you and I are a lot alike, and then there's other ways that we're completely different, and that's kind of one of them. And it was impressive uh, when you said before we even got to camp, before we even got on our horse and started packing in, you're like, dude, this is what's going to happen. And I was like, I don't know, man. I've been elk hunting a lot over the past 6 years, and it's pretty difficult. You're like, yeah, I get that, but this is what's going to happen. And I was like, I appreciate your enthusiasm, and I'm just happy to share camp with you, because over the years, I don't know if it's just a coping mechanism, but you find different ways to redefine success. Hey, I saw an animal, I'm happy. Or hey, I got to draw my bow back, but I let it down, and that's pretty neat. Or hey, I got to shoot an arrow, I missed it completely, but you know what, gosh darn it, that's pretty exciting. So you kind of find other ways to redefine success. And so when we're getting to camp and you're like, dude, this is what's going to happen, I'm going to do this, and this is what it's going to be. You could imagine for me sitting on that horse thinking, I don't know if he knows how hard this is going to be.
Well, to give the listeners a little more background on manifestation, the very beginning that started this whole Washington backcountry Soulful Hunter, the hunt that started it all. I called you on my way to my very first backcountry hunt, and I go, Jeff, I'm going bear hunting. I'm going to go kill a bear. And do you
Yeah.
remember what you said to me?
I was like, seriously? I was like, bear hunt? I go, are you hunting over bait? No, I'm not hunting over bait. I was like, dude, bear hunting is hard. You're like, yeah, I'm going to go shoot a bear. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay. And
yeah, you go, I hope you at least see one.
yeah. And that's how I felt. I was like, dude, if you see one, John, then you know what? That's going to be a success in and of itself. And you're like, no, I'm going to go shoot a bear. And I was like, I know, John, but if you see one, that's going to be just the cherry on top. That's just going to be great. Because my experience is bear hunting, and I have a couple bears in the house here, are up in Saskatchewan, spring bear over bait. And I know people have different views of hunting over bait. That's just something I'm personally okay with. So, that was my experience. And you're telling me you're going to hike 9 miles into the backcountry and shoot a bear, and you did. It was
Yes.
tremendous.
Yeah. So this is this concept of like, I'm gonna do it. I have my mindset. I've put it out into the universe. This is what's going to happen. Period.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shoot an elk. I already shot a bear. I know what my journey is. I can see it. Like just like coaches. Because you coached high school football, you coached multiple sports, you played college sports. So did I. There's a lot of visualization that goes into athletics.
Definitely.
Visualize it. Put yourself in the scenario. What's going to happen when the game's on the line? Where are you going to be? How are you going to hold the ball? Are you going to shoot, pass? Do you want it in your hands? Do you want it in someone else's hands? I visualized my hunts before I even got there.
Yep.
I saw it. I saw myself in the moment. And for those of you listening, like if hunting, now there's a difference between like just, I'm going to go out for the day. I'm going to go see what I can find and la la la. I'm talking about I had a plan for a destination hunt, a week off of school, a week off of work, where I had a mission My mission now, if I wasn't going to shoot an elk, I was okay with that because I wanted to always enjoy the adventure because it's all about that adventure and what you learn from it. But at the same time, I was like, okay, no, but for some reason I can't get this out of my head. I'm shooting an elk.
Yep.
It is going to happen. And so I tell you, and you're like, okay, cool, man.
Yeah.
Like, right on.
It goes back to that one coach I work with that he's like, yeah, you're a full-time skeptic. You know, I was kind of like, it's hard, man. You know, it's not going to be easy, but you're determined. And just like anything else, like I'm thinking about you, how the last few weeks we've been talking, and you've been talking about your ultra marathon training. And I know I'm getting off topic, but you're speaking that into existence right now too. As we sit here and talk, you ran 30 miles the other day. 30 miles.
Yep.
Why? Oh,
that's a great question. My wife asked me that also.
And that's just training.
Yeah, that was just a warm up, a training run.
To go run 100 miles.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible. And you've kind of always had that the power of positive thinking, and it's kind of always been, you know, who you are, and that's why you've been such a really good coach. And you know, and it is infectious. I will say that. I may not have said so at the time, but you know, it is infectious, and a guy does have tendencies then to maybe start thinking that way.
Hey, let me just say, it's okay if you do. It's good to be a positive person in your own life and in the lives of others.
Hey, I appreciate the permission. So it's good stuff. And you know, I think about things like that from time to time, and just as important as we learn about wind and we learn about topography, we learn about where animals like to bed down, where they like to eat. You know, you got to be right in the mind to do a lot of the stuff that we do. You have to have a little bit of, you know, positive mentality, if you will, to go into some of the places we go to. Because if you were to look at some of these places face value, you'd be like, nobody's going down there. And you're like, wrong, we're going down there. Not only are we going down there, we're going to go down there, we're going to harvest the animal and bring it back up, you know?
Yep.
So you've got to have your mind right to do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. You know, it brings me into, I was having a conversation today with my buddy Josh Gatonik, who I'm running my ultra marathon with. And the other day when we were running our 30-mile run, I'm running with this guy, and we like to talk while we run, and you know, it helps pass the time and the miles. And I turned to him while we're running, and I'm like, "What are you thinking about?" And he was like, "Man, you know, just thinking about what I got to do to keep going."
Yeah.
And so today I had this conversation with him, and he brought it back up to me, and he was like, in that moment, when you asked me what I was thinking about, I was thinking about my nutrition, my body, and I was just going to the depths of my own mind to really bear down and know what it is I need to make sure I am successful in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you apply that mindset to your hunt, it is that hyper focus that helps you be the ultimate predator in the woods.
Yep, no doubt. No doubt.
You know, that sets you apart year after year, season after season, and on all these different hunts is where you get better. You sharpen your sword, and you're a lot more sharp and alert in the woods with everything that you do.
Yep, no doubt. And like for me personally, because I'm not in the best shape if you would think of, like, you start thinking about guys like Cam Hanes, right? Who are just men amongst boys when it comes to their fitness. But then I look at just other guys in the industry and how fit they are. Like what Brian Call did. I mean, he transformed his body, man. That guy is a machine now. And what all these elk hunters, they're just so fit. And I'm not on that level of fitness, And the one thing that I feel like is my personal advantage is my mind. I feel like personally that I can do anything and I can grit through anything. And I feel confident about my mental toughness. And that's not something that, I don't typically talk about, but since you and I are, sharing a little bit tonight, I'll share with your listeners. I always felt like I've been mentally tough, but that is a terrible excuse to be in bad shape. Nonetheless, I have gone places that a lot of people would not and cannot go. And it really goes back to your mind. And like what we were talking about earlier, just visualizing it and getting it done.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk more about the mind. Here we are, day 2 of our hunt. We call in a bull elk. You're down the trail from me.
Yeah.
But you know that it is my turn to shoot.
Oh, sure. Yep.
It's my turn to shoot. You have said that. And I know I hesitated right there because I thought about it for a moment, but it's like, you were like, yes, day 2, your turn to shoot. From your perspective, and I haven't even shared this story with my listeners, what went down to the moment in the lead up into my shot?
Oh,
what was your perspective?
That 5 or 6 minutes when everything started going down, that's a tough one that I don't typically talk about. And you and I have talked about it a little bit, and I've talked about it a little bit with some of my really close buddies. But having elk hunted, basically 6 of the last 10 years, and my experiences, in teaching, we always talk about background knowledge. Well, my background knowledge said opportunities are few and far between. And as we were sitting there, you and I were on the trail, and I was probably, I want to say it was about 70 yards. I think I remember ranging it. I was 70 yards from you, east and west, and this bull was coming down off the mountain from the north. And I was sitting it was in the east of you. And when that bull came down and I started seeing the cedar saplings shaking, and I knew I knew what was happening as he was bugling down the hill, and I thought, all right, here we go. I popped a few ranges on the side of the hill, and that bull poked out just piping mad. And he was standing at about 60, and I could have shot up the hill, and I had my release on the string. It was on the D loop, and arrow was knocked, and I had my ranges, and I'm like, okay, he's at 60. And I looked over to you. I remember looking over to you, and I'm like, can you see him? And you're shaking your head no. And I'm like, okay. So we're being patient, and he works down to about 30 yards, right smack dab in between us. And he was
we're like in a perfect triangle.
Yep. And he was perfectly broadside at 30 yards. And I just remember that conscious moment that I had. And there's probably elk hunters that are going to listen to this that are going to just start cussing at once I say this. But I took my release off the D loop at 30 yards.
So just so listeners know, when this bull elk was 30 yards broadside at you, we both had arrows knocked. All I could see was his head and antlers.
Yep.
And so did you look over at me to see, like, was I at full draw? What was I doing at that point? And what made you take your release off the D loop?
So so it was just a crazy, and it's surreal how vivid things get in these kind of moments. But I had him at 30 yards. He was broadside. And I looked over to you, and you were still trying to peek over that little knob. I could see you trying to see it. You were looking for the elk. And you were looking in the right direction, but I knew you couldn't see it. And I was pretty sure you didn't have a shot. Part of me wanted to just shoot it right there. And you know that. We've talked about that because
Yep.
Since my Montana hunt, that's the closest I've been to an elk, let alone 290, maybe 300-inch 6x6. So the level of excitement that I had was pretty dang high. But I just told myself that it wasn't my turn to shoot, and it was your turn. That's what we agreed on. And either you're going to shoot this thing or he's going to run away. And so I just took my release off the D-loop and sat back and just enjoyed the next minutes to come. And as it worked out, that bull, he took a turn to his right, back to the west, walked over the knob, and presented you with just a great opportunity.
Yeah. And I released it, and I had the shakes like a first-time hunter. Never, like, it's hard to put into words how much I had the shakes. Not only was I first-time archery hunting, the first time I ever was at full draw, first time I ever saw an antlered animal in my sight, and it was a bull elk, just pissed beyond belief, and I front-shouldered him.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I front shouldered him and you saw what happened, what went through your mind?
Oh man. Heartache, disappointment.
Based off the way you're sharing the story, I hope these listeners, like, it's mentally put me back in that zone, but like I can hear the pain and like the suffering in your voice as you're telling the story. So I hope the listeners are picking up on this also.
And I'm not trying to be, melancholy or anything about it. It's just, that's just the truth. Because I've everywhere I've gone elk hunting, I've hunted really hard. Not like casually hard, or I'll hunt this day and take a couple days off. And, I've grinded really hard. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, I could have killed this thing at 30 yards a million times over.
So from my perspective, I front shoulder this elk, and before this hunt, we talked about how do you know if you got a good shot on an elk? And you said, if he runs downhill, you got a good shot on him. If he runs uphill, good luck.
Yep. Yeah.
I shoot this bull, and he comes downhill at me. I end up getting another shot on him. I swear I was dead on. I wasn't shaking at the second shot. I release, and all of a sudden I hear a whack. Like the arrow smacked a tree.
Because it did.
You come running down trail, and you were like, where did you put that second arrow?
Yeah.
Where did you put that second arrow? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I was dead on, but all I heard was a tree. What were you thinking at that point?
Well, yeah, I was. So at the time I wasn't thinking, hey, good job, way to knock a second arrow, which is tremendous in and of itself. I mean, there are veteran hunters that put one arrow in an elk, have an opportunity for another one, and don't do it. Why? I have no idea. I have no idea. But and maybe some of your more seasoned hunters that listen to you, maybe they'll have some great reason. Maybe the next guy on your next podcast will tell me this is the reason why I only shoot once. But the way I look at it, shoot it until it falls. So I mean, you did good getting that second arrow. But at the time, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking you just airmailed your second arrow into a tree on an absolute stud of an elk. And I was like, it was one thing to have a crappy shot the first time, but if you're going to tell me you got another crappy shot on this thing, like all those years of just lack of success and putting an animal down, we're really starting to bubble up to the surface. So to say,
as I can tell,
yeah, to say I wasn't overly excited as I was standing next to you, that would have been a gross understatement.
Luckily, we backed out, and there is a video on the Washington Backcountry's YouTube channel. There's a short little 1-minute clip
Beautiful,
of
by the
when
way.
we find the bull, and I know that it's down. And it turns out, for all you listeners who don't know this story, is I double lunged him, and what I heard was the arrow passing through and sticking in a tree behind him.
Yeah.
Perfect shot.
Perfect. Couldn't have been any better.
He died, I don't know, less than 100 yards away.
Yeah, it was about
from
60
that
yards.
Second shot.
60 yards from where your arrow was, where we found it.
Yeah.
It's tremendous.
I mean, you can't ask for a better opportunity than what that was. But here I am. Jeff didn't know what happened. It's day 2 of our hunt. We got an elk down, and things are looking up. It's like, okay, now I have the rest of the week, and I don't have any competition. We're not flipping coins or choosing shot opportunities based off of days. What was going through your head at that time?
Yeah, I was feeling pretty confident. I was like, hey, this is a good deal. We're into elk. We have an idea where they're at. We have a decent idea what they're doing. And, I've got 4 days left to get it done. And, confidence was pretty high at that point.
Yeah. So what happened next?
Well, days went by, and we had an interesting day. Like I've told you, I don't hunt in downpouring rain. Like even my guided hunts when I go up to Saskatchewan and I do bear and different things, I have a real hard time. And this is just a personal thing, and everybody's different. But on days when it's downpouring, I don't like to hunt just because I'm nervous that if I shoot something, that blood trail will wash away. So that's just a choice that, or a decision that I made. And we had a rain day that next day, and I said, we're gonna stay in the camp. We're not gonna go hunt. And you were like, dude, we got to go. We got to go. We know where the elk are. We know what they're doing. And I remember telling you, I was like, John, it's not something I'm comfortable with. And you're like, okay, all right. So we'll sit back and we'll just reminisce and just kind of bathe in the glory of the elk hunt that we had the day before. Yeah. And then later on that day, a guy walking through camp had an elk on his back.
Yeah, so let's get into this just a little bit, because just not to make this a topic of the podcast, when we were processing, breaking down my elk, another hunter sees us, comes up to us.
Oh yeah, that day.
And
yep.
And that day is like, oh man, so you guys got an elk down. Awesome. And, instantly the elk down tells another hunter that there's elk in the area.
Yep.
Or at least there were.
Yep.
However, the area in which we were hunting was too good for the elk not to return to.
Right.
And so here he is. He sees us. He knows that we're hunting this area. And he comes back into camp the next day, on the day that Jeff doesn't hunt, with now it wasn't a monster bull elk, it was a 4x6, but it was still a bull elk. And he says, yeah, I shot this thing just a couple 100 yards from where yours is laying.
Yeah, and when we rolled up on his gut pile, it was literally like, I don't know, 80 yards, 90 yards. It was less than 100 yards from where we got into yours.
And at that point, I'm thinking to myself, dude, he just shot your elk.
Yeah.
And what are you thinking at that time?
I'm thinking, my thought was, that's not good as far as from a pressure standpoint. I wasn't looking at it like, hey, that was my elk per se. I was thinking, crap. Elk are really smart animals, and they're not going to tolerate human pressure a whole lot. And so the fact that there was another guy in there, I was like, buddy, we're not going to see elk anymore. And you just, you kept trying to be positive and lift my spirits like a good friend and a good hunting partner. But, I had that deep sinking feeling like this isn't good for us. And, it ended up not being good for us.
Yeah. So the listeners, he never shot an elk.
Nope.
And at this point in his hunting career and hunting elk, anytime you hunt elk, it's going to be quite an endeavor, especially when you're hunting out of state. So you hunted out of state in Montana, you hunted out of state in Colorado.
Yep.
And now you come to Washington.
Yep.
You spend a lot of time and money away from your family.
Yep, for sure.
Elk hunting.
And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is, when we're out, especially the Western hunter, and the things that the Western hunter goes through that I think are unique to being a Western hunter. For example, in the Midwest here, I can go after school, after I get off work, I can be out at the deer blind, just like I shot my whitetail this year. I shot it out of a blind. I went after school about 6 miles out of town, hopped in a blind, and I was hunting. And I did that for a couple weeks, and then I harvested one. The Western hunter, when they go places, they have to travel distance, typically, and a lot of times it's in rugged terrain that's hard to get to. And so when the Western hunter wants to get to their hunting spot, chances are they're bringing a tent or something to stay in the field with, and they're going to be away from their families for an extended amount of time, and it's going to cost money, so that I think that's one of the unique challenges that the Western hunter faces. And it's one of those things I think often gets overlooked, is just how much time it takes to hunt out west and to put a good effort forward. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going through my brain when we were out there.
And so when this hunt ends and you do not harvest an elk, it is now your third out-of-state trip hunting elk and not being successful with taking meat home.
Yep. And
you turn to me and you say, I'm done.
Yeah. And if I could paint the picture, you and I were up on the ridge, kind of overlooking Packwood Lake and the mountains around us. And it was pretty majestic. And having been my friend for so long, I'm not exactly the most vulnerable. I'm not.
Yeah, definitely not.
I'm not the emotions on my sleeve kind of guy. But at the end of that hunt, I had just felt with where my kids were at in their life and the time and energy, the money, the resources that I'd put in to elk hunting, that was just it. And that I was going to have to take something that I love and I enjoy doing, elk hunting, and put it on hold for a while just for the betterment of my family and my kids. And so that was a real hard thing. It was kind of like when college sports was over and you knew it was over. It was kind of like that with elk hunting. At that particular time when I looked at you, I thought that it was over, and, Bible talks about, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And that was just, I had felt like everything had run its course and hope was gone.
And leading into this hunt, I had an idea, and you shared with me that this could possibly be your last elk hunt.
Yep.
But then to come away with not having the elk, it really like sealed the deal. Nail in the coffin. It's done.
Yeah, that was it. And, I was wanting to be really happy for you, which I was, just tremendously happy. Just as a friend and a hunting partner. And I was just overly excited for you. But there was just that, nagging feeling that I had that just kind of tormented my soul. Like somehow I had failed, and that was it. And that's what it was going to be.
And that you had a shot 30 yards broadside on this elk before I even saw it.
Oh, I love salting an open wound.
Like, hey man,
yeah,
thanks for not shooting the elk.
And some of my buddies that I spend a lot of time with here hunting and whatnot, how did you not shoot that? They're like, screw that guy, shoot it out from under him. Like, you've been doing this for a long time, and this is this guy's first trip. He wouldn't have even known the difference. And I was like, I get that, but I would have known, and I couldn't have looked in the mirror at myself knowing that. So, and kind of along the lines of everything happens for a reason. I just felt as I was flying back to North Dakota, I was like, everything happens for a reason. And you getting that bull was going to be tremendous, not just from a food standpoint for you and your family, but the story that you get to share. And it has helped with your platform. And for that, it's a no-brainer. I don't shoot 10 times out of 10 in that situation. I have no qualms or regrets about that whole hunt. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting how in the hunting world that, when a guy wants to talk about the power of hunting and how amazing hunting is and all that, but if he doesn't have any animals to show like he's actually killed, people are like, well, who is this guy? And this guy doesn't even know what really hunting's all about. And all of a sudden I have a resume with a mature bull elk on it in the hunting world, and it's like, dude, okay, this guy was able to get his hands on that. Maybe he knows a little bit about what he's talking about.
Oh, for sure. Everybody needs things to help validate themselves. And whether it's, an animal or whatever it may be, that right there is an elk like that. You can show that picture and people are going to ask questions, and they're going to naturally want to know about that hunt. And that hunt, and I'm thankful for that hunt. That hunt has caused so many great conversations that you have had with other people, and it has all led back to your mission. Mentorship is conservation. You can't outgive good. So that animal, in a sense, has helped you and your company grow. And that's tremendous because your message is fantastic. I
appreciate that.
I think about your message often, and the idea of mentorship as conservation is just, I think you hit the nail right on the head with that. So.
Well, and that's why I'm going to Salt Lake City to the Western Hunt Expo to really spread that message even more on a larger platform, because I truly believe in it.
Well,
The idea that, people are going to invest time where their heart is and money where their heart is. And if you want hunting to last, you got to hook their heart. And that starts with mentorship. Investing your time into somebody is really going to help them fall in love with hunting.
yep.
So getting back onto the avenue of things happen for a reason, you're on the plane home. You've already told me I'm never elk hunting again, at least for a long time, until my kids are out of high school.
Yep.
That's 2 decades from now. And I'm like, nah, man, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Not that I don't believe you're a man of your word, but I'm like, no, that it doesn't go down like that. This is where I feel like the universe is rigged in our favor. In that, as long as you are not going against the flow and you're going with the flow, you get rewarded.
Yep.
You not shooting that elk ended up being the best thing for you. And not just the best thing for you, but the best thing also for me. So I'm like, no way, dude, your story doesn't end like that. We are living the life in which we get the final shot.
Yep.
Like going back to that whole mindset, like putting myself in that hunt, I'm like, there's no way your elk hunting career ends like that.
Yeah. The John Mack power of positive thinking. You were definitely ahead of the curve on that one, because I thought you were crazy. I was kind of in a little bit of a funk there and kind of down in that pit of dismay, but you were definitely not. So hey, kudos to you for being ahead of the curve on that.
Well, I appreciate it. I'll tell you, after that hunt, I actually even had a hard time talking to you, because I was like, oh my gosh, does he want to talk to me? I can only imagine how pissed he is.
I had a hard time talking to you.
So I'm glad
we can
it's
clear
been a year and a half since we've
I'm glad we can clear that up for your listeners.
Yeah, even the best of hunting buddies, you might not talk to him for a while if you have a situation like this go down.
Yeah, best of hunting buddies. I mean, I look at you as a brother, and we talk about that all the time, away from the podcast here, just how close our relationship is. And, so to put it in that kind of context, to not want to talk to your brother for a while, it was,
it's kind of a major ordeal.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing.
So here we are. This is the 2018 hunting season.
Mm-hmm.
You fly home in September. You have a whole school year of teaching. You took all this time to come out to the state of Washington, and in my head, I'm like, there's no way you're not hunting elk anymore. You're telling me it's over. What happens?
Yeah, so in the state of North Dakota, we have what's called the Big Three. They're once-in-a-lifetime tags. We've got bighorn sheep, we've got elk, and we've got moose. And it's not on a point system. It's a random draw. So you apply for these three every year. I think it's like, I want to say it's like $15 or $20. You just throw in your application. And everybody does it every year. And, there's been guys that have been doing this for 30 and 40 years applying for this thing that have never had any success. And my daughter was having dental surgery in a town 2 hours away from where I live. And it was just a stressful time for my family. And we were staying in a hotel while her operations were going on. And we get back to the hotel, and we finally got the kids, and we get everybody tucked in and give them their medicine, and everybody seems to be sleeping. And I'm just trying to pass the time. So I'm on my phone, hanging out on Instagram and checking out all the latest stuff. And I thought to myself, I should check my email real quick. And so I checked my email, and there's the North Dakota Game and Fish email. And I was like, oh, they drew the Big Three. Well, let me just check. Moose, nope, sorry, you were unsuccessful. Bighorn sheep, nope, sorry, you were unsuccessful. But when I clicked the elk one, it said you were successful. And I thought it was a joke at first. So I got onto the Game and Fish website to double check. And sure enough, I log in under my account and it says, congratulations. You have successfully drawn a once in a lifetime North Dakota elk tag. And I was speechless because I thought that I was done with this. Like, I felt like this chapter of my life was getting put on pause for the foreseeable future. And my wife thought this part of my life was getting put on pause for the foreseeable future. So as happy as I was, she was less excited. So
let me jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
Listeners, you cannot outgive good. When you put out good into the universe, when you are living a life of giving, you always get it coming back in return. And you don't give for the return, you give out of the kindness and the love of your own heart. Jeff passed on that elk for me because he knew that it just wasn't right. Here it is, he did the right thing, and in return, the full circle, he ends up drawing a once-in-a-lifetime elk tag for the state of North Dakota, which is not only good for just one weapon, but it's open for all seasons.
Yep, for sure. So you could hunt. I started out hunting with my bow and ended up finishing off with rifle. But yeah, it was exciting to say the least. I was in the hallway of a Motel 6 fist pumping as people were walking by the pop machine looking at me like I was on drugs. I was happy. It was awkward. I'm like, hey, here's people I'll never see again in my life, so who really cares? I'm just yahooing. And my parents, they flew from Lewis County. They flew to North Dakota for my kids' surgeries. And so they were there. And my dad walks out of his room and he's like, what in the hell are you doing? And I was like, Dad, you'll never believe this. I just drew a once in a lifetime elk tag. And my dad, not being a hunter, just, my dad's an outdoorsman. He loves salmon fishing, right? Hunting, not his bag of tricks. He looked at me, he's like, is that good? I was like, are you kidding me? Did you not hear the once in a lifetime part? He's like, oh, okay. He's like, well, get back in there and be quiet. He goes, your kids are sleeping. I was like, oh, okay. But, I had just a tremendous amount of excitement, and I start texting and calling all of my friends here in town. It's met with, hey, congratulations, right down to one of my best hunting buddies here in town that he's a local fishing guide too. He's and a tremendous guide at that. Like, he's a heck of a fisherman. But him and I are really good friends, and I told him, and he's a North Dakota resident his whole life, and I told him, and he was mad. He was angry, and I told him, I said, here's the deal. You got 7 days to grieve on the fact that you've been applying your whole life for this tag, and I've only lived in this state for 10 years. I said, you got 7 days to grieve. And after that, I said, it's time to, get the boots on and start scouting. And he took full advantage of those 7 days. I'll try and, be polite about that. He definitely took full advantage of his 7 days to grieve. But after that, he said, all right, let's go. And the unit that I was in, I would imagine that on phone scope and, pictures and trail cameras and all the scouting that we did and the miles that we put on and all those good things, I'd venture to say we saw the vast majority of elk in that unit. And there were some world-class elk in that unit. So it was exciting, and it was fun, and it kind of rejuvenated my spirit, if you will. And it was just, The words cannot describe the season that unfolded.
Yeah, so from my perspective, here I am listening to you talk about you drew this tag. I'm like, oh, sweet, man. You don't have to be gone for a week at a time. You're going to be able to almost, if you need to, hunt weekends. So you're going to be able to, help out the wife and kids a lot more, be home. You can hunt all 3 seasons, so there's not pressure to get it done instantly. And here you are, you end up filling your tag, and you don't just fill your tag on just any elk. You end up smacking just an absolute giant. What
Yeah.
what did that thing end up measuring?
Well, I'll back it up a little bit. The idea of, hey, you're not going to be gone a lot, and I was gone a lot. My wife and just about every elk hunter and hunter that listens to your podcast is probably going to shake their head and be like in agreement with what I'm going to say. Is I was gone a lot. I scouted a lot. The pressure of a once in a lifetime tag is tremendous. I felt like I had a responsibility to put in the very best effort I could. I coached varsity football at a really big school in this state, similar to, the time that you spent coaching up in the Everett, Snohomish area, big schools up there, the pressure that goes along with coaching at a big school. So I was coaching football Monday through Friday, and fortunately our head coach was gracious. He understood the magnitude of the tag. And Friday nights after games, I was gone. I was staying the night in the woods. I was in the field every weekend through the entire month of September and into October. In which, and being a football coach, there's a lot that goes into preparing for a game from week to week, especially at the bigger schools and the higher levels. It was a lot, and my wife was left at home to pick up a lot of the pieces, especially with 3 kids, all very young. She held it together, and I'm sure you can relate. I know you can relate. I know other people listening can relate. My wife was a rock, and without her, this wouldn't have been possible. Not even close. So
Yeah. Well, that's a great perspective right there. So you end up filling this tag.
Yeah.
You put in a lot of time. You ended up having to go through some challenges. But as far as like the period to a sentence of a career of elk hunting, there's no better way to finish it.
Right. And so it would have been October 6th. Thinking of you can't outgive good, and just the generosity of people. I was on the elk with one of my good friends, and then the elk were gone. And we didn't know why. But I got a random call from a guy that said he knew where they were. And not only did he know where they were, he was wanting to take me there. And I met up with him and, hey, are you hunting these elk? Yes, I am. I'm looking for one of these bulls that I've got pictures of, showed him some video. And he's like, yeah, they moved. They're not where you thought they were. They're down here. And he doesn't have an elk tag. He's just a guy that loves the outdoors, spend a lot of time out in the hills, deer hunting, and knew where the elk were. And by the grace of God, somehow found a way to get a hold of me. And so we end up getting down to where the elk were, and then the chase was on. What I thought was going to be, with my rifle, an easy 200-yard shot turned into 3 ridges over in the Badlands, which the Badlands of North Dakota are just rugged. I don't know how to explain them. And
they live up to their name.
Yeah, they live up to their name. And to be able to do them justice, it was just hard. And we ended up chasing these things 3 ridges over, and lo and behold, the bull that we wanted gave us a shot and got prone and took my wind and got a shooting solution together and sent one right into the lungs. And like I told you earlier, why wouldn't you shoot another arrow? If you go back to that, I shot 3 times with a 300 Win Mag. This elk was dead on the first shot, but the other 2 were going because he was he was magnificent, and I was going to shoot until he fell, and he dropped right in front of me.
Man, that's incredible. So there you are.
Yeah.
You shot your first elk and you saw him drop and you have like a confirmed kill.
Yep. I knew he was down and I was so tired. I had a rear rest, just like it's kind of like a bean bag, a small bean bag, if you will, a foot by a foot, 12 inches by 12 inches. We call them puff pillows in the long range shooting game. I had a puff pillow with me, and after the elk fell, I was so exhausted that I cleared my gun, rolled over, put the rear rest, the puff pillow behind my head, and just stared at the sky. And the guy that was with me is just going out of his brain excited. But I was just so tired and spent that I couldn't high five or any of that. I don't know if it was, the physical side of it, the miles that we had to put on to get there was tough, but I don't know if it was the mental, the emotional, a combination of both. But like in that moment, I was just spent. And I just remember rolling over, looking at the sky, being so thankful that I had this opportunity. And as it turns out, when we got to it and got the tape on it, we're looking at a 372 and 2/8, 7x6, just a mammoth bull. So,
yeah,
it was a tremendous experience, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I can imagine like the monkey that came off your back after you shot that. It's like,
yeah. We talked a little bit earlier in the podcast about validation, and it wasn't necessary. I don't know if it was validation or just what I've felt necessarily, but for whatever reason, and everybody's experience is different, and your listeners might think it's kind of cheesy or whatever, but it is what it is. I just, at that moment there, I felt like an elk hunter,
Yep.
And it's hard to explain, but that was the feeling I had was, I feel like an elk hunter now.
Yeah. And that is an important feeling because so many people who are new to hunting, who have not even shot an animal or even seen an animal in which they were pursuing, at what point do they feel like they are a hunter versus just a hiker?
Yo, for sure.
Versus someone who's just trying to find nature.
Right. And you and I talk about that all the time, just in our professional lives as far as education. If kids don't have success, they're at a certain point, they're going to look at you and be like, hey, man, you're crazy. I'm not listening to you anymore.
Right.
And at a certain point in every hunter's career, they want to feel that success, not necessarily the redefined success, as I've learned over the years. Hey, I drew my bow back. That's really neat. Hey, I saw animals. That's really neat. At a certain point, you'd like to seal the deal. And I'm so thankful that the people around me that helped and scouted and put miles on their boots, and these people didn't have to. They just didn't. But they just gave. And it was just a tremendous feeling, not just for myself, but the people around me that worked so hard to help make this happen. And
yeah, absolutely,
you know, in sports, we talk about the team victory. This was a total team win. This elk right here was definitely a total team win.
yeah. It takes a village.
Oh, no doubt.
Not just to raise kids,
no doubt,
or raise a good citizen. It takes a village for every aspect of life.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more with you.
This is exactly why mentorship is so important.
Oh, it's vital. I mean, it is vital, no doubt about it. And these horns that I'm staring at right now as we're talking are definitely evidence of that.
It is a great reward.
Yeah.
It is the trophy to go along with the meat that immortalizes not only that animal's life, but everything, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that entire journey.
Oh man, it's been talked about before. It's been said before, and I'm pretty sure on some of your shows that I've listened to, you've talked about it. But the horns are there, and I get to see them, and a lot of people will look at them and recognize the trophy that it is. But the story that's going to go along with these horns, not just the animal and the chase and the video, but the friendships, the efforts, the blood, the sweat, the tears, everything that went into harvesting this animal. I mean, every time we see these horns, I mean, we get to talk about it. It's really, really cool, for lack of a better word. It's just really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that when you're 80 years old and in your rocking chair, you'll be staring at that animal on the wall and just be like, it'll bring you right back into it.
Oh, for sure.
Everything will be worth it.
And it goes beyond that, because when I look at this bull, I can tell you the stories that were a part of that hunt, but it goes so much further back. It was our hunt that we shared together. It was the failed hunts in Montana. It was the failed hunts in Colorado. It was the mistakes I made along the way. I just felt like it was a culmination of life experiences that led to this. And just grateful, because it doesn't always work out this way. It just doesn't. There are guys that hunt really hard their whole lives, and trophy hunt at that, that put in months and years and decades and never have an opportunity at something like this. So it really, it's a humbling thing when you really start thinking about it like that.
Yeah. And it's something to be very thankful, but yet very proud of.
Oh, for sure.
You do not have to be shy or extremely afraid to tell your story. It's like, dude, this is it. There's beauty in it.
Oh, no doubt.
This is your journey of you becoming an elk hunter.
Yeah. And it was long. It was painful. There were highs and there were lows, and some of those lows I thought were unrecoverable. But here we are 10 years later, and I feel like a completely different person because of the experience I just had.
I love it. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your story with everyone and diving into some vulnerable aspects of your life and your hunting career and all that. People need to hear this. People need to. One of the things that I've realized in life is that there's safety in numbers. And so when one person shares, it allows other people to reflect and also to feel comfortable in their own shoes and their own experiences. And then it opens doors and communications for things to happen. you telling your story and sharing some of the emotions in which you felt and the things that you've dealt with, the challenges and whatnot, it impacts people's lives. You may not know it right now. You may not find out later. You may not ever know. But the story makes a difference in people's lives, and it's important for you to remember that. So thank you for sharing that with myself and also all the listeners. How can some of these listeners get a hold of you if they want to, or give you some feedback on this episode, or just if they ever want to reach out to you, whether they're hunting the Midwest or want some advice, where can they find you at?
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you doing that. You can find me on Instagram. That's the best way to get a hold of me. You can find me. My username is sendit110. Get a hold of me on Instagram. And I'm definitely a firm believer in paying it forward. So if there's anything anyone needs and they find themselves in the North Dakota area, hit me up on Instagram at sendit110, and I will do whatever I can to help people in their journey, whatever that might look like. Because I feel like I paid it forward a little bit, and people paid it forward and returned it with me. I just feel like it's an obligation for me to continue to do that. So hit me up on Instagram, and I will definitely do my best to help people where I can.
I love it. You are a good dude. That's the reason why I'm friends with you. I love it. Jeff, thanks for joining us. Everyone, make sure to go check out Jeff's Instagram profile. Go follow him. Shoot him a DM. Let him know what you think of this episode. And as always, everybody, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast, as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.